What if you could just pick up the guitar and instantly start improvising the music that you love to hear the most? I think most of us would agree that we would find it actually very difficult to ever get bored of the instrument, and we might even actually struggle putting the guitar down for the day when we're practicing. Unfortunately, this is the opposite experience for many of us, where we pick up the instrument to practice, only to be really frustrated that we don't actually understand what we're supposed to be doing with the scales, the triads, and the chords we've been practicing, in order to just make music and pick up the guitar and actually play. So today I'm going to show you what we need to do and what we need to practice in order to understand how to just make music with the scales, triads, and chords that we already understand how to play. So the first thing that we want to do is just understand the chords inside of a key signature. I'm sure many of us already understand this. We already know what this is. But we know that we have 3 major chords, 3 minor chords, 1 diminished chords, all totaling 7 different chords that come from a key signature. So for today, let's focus on the key of G major. But instead of being boring and just playing everything around this kind of like first chord of the key, let's pick a more interesting chord inside the key signature. So let's try D major. We know that D major is the 5th chord inside of the key of G major, right? And then what we're going to do, we're going to look at the scales that we can play around this chord of D major. Now, the most obvious one is going to be the D major pentatonic. But again, if we know how to play our major scale positions all across the fretboard, we know that we can play the 5th position of the major scale from this chord as well. Again, because this is the 5th chord in our key, and this is the 5th scale position, they're going to line up quite nicely. So once we understand what scales we can play over the top of our chord, we're going to practice this exercise, right? This is really important for unlocking the ability to just kind of like jam out with chords and scales. So we're going to play a little exercise where we just keep a little rhythm going with this chord, and then we're going to run through the scale stepwise. Again, the chord that you play, you can make it a power chord, you can make it a full bar chord, you could use like just a triad inside there. Again, it's completely up to you how you play the chord, but what is quite important is the scale exercise that we're going to play over the top of this. There's going to be diagrams for the scales on the screen so you can follow along with that. Again, if you want to download these diagrams for yourself, you'll be able to do it for free by joining my school community. There is a link to join in the description. But anyway, back to the exercise. What we're going to try and do is just move stepwise, note by note, up the scale. Which like sounds really easy when I do it like this, right? But we're going to combine that with the rhythm we're going to keep with this chord that we're holding down. So we're just going to go like this. And again, you can practice it backwards as well if you like by going. It's always important to practice you're running down your scales in the opposite direction as well. Now again, this exercise is really useful because it's going to help your fingers identify which notes and kind of frets you're allowed to hit, which is going to be quite important once you get really comfortable with these scale positions. It gets to a point where like your brain doesn't really have to think about where your fingers are going, and you can kind of just do things on instinct. And again, by just doing these kind of like really robotic type of exercises, it programs your fingers to just kind of like just understand where they're supposed to go. And another important part of this exercise is that it kind of teaches you how each scale tone rubs against your chord. And you're going to learn where there are kind of like tension points and when there's kind of like resolution points inside of these scale shapes. And that's going to inform the notes that you choose to play when you're playing over the top of this chord. Like, again, if you want to resolve your phrase and finish it, it would be probably a good idea to kind of finish on those like resolution notes. And if you want to add a kind of bit of like tension or kind of intrigue or mystery, maybe kind of hold one of those tension notes, right? Again, this exercise is quite important because it allows you to develop that kind of sense of what note to play with your ear. Now, once we've kind of done this exercise, we're kind of comfortable with doing that, we're going to level it up a tiny bit more. So instead of focusing on just the scale now, we're going to focus on the triads inside of these scale shapes. For this D major chord, we can play this root position triad right over here, kind of right in the middle. So now what we're going to do, we're going to look at the scale tones that lie above and below these chord tones inside of the triad. So we've got a root over here, and then we have these scale tones that exist above and below the root. So we have this is above the root inside the scale shape, and this is below the root inside the scale shape. So we kind of have like some notes either side of this triad that we can kind of choose to play. And again, the exact same thing as this for the third inside the triad as well. So again, we have this chord tone right here. We can choose to play a scale tone above or a scale tone right below. And you can kind of mix and match them and land back on your chord tone to kind of finalize and resolve everything. Again, the exact same thing works for the fifth as well, right? So we have this scale tone above, the scale tone below. Right? And you can do that with every single point of your triad. So what we're going to do now is we're going to play this little kind of rhythm again with our chord. And then we're going to focus on just going above and below and hitting that triad note. And again, do this for every single point in your triad. Try it with a third as well. And again, you can do it for your fifth as well. And once you're comfortable with doing it for each of those individual notes, try kind of like messing around and combining some of them together. So this is going to teach you to focus improvising and coming up with riffs and licks around the chord tones. It's going to keep you grounded to the chord you're playing, and that's the key to sounding melodic and musical on the instrument, rather than just kind of like running up and down a scale. We already know how to do that. We already know how to practice going like. We want to practice understanding how to be musical and be creative with the things that we already know how to play. And then it's going to become easy to just kind of pick up the instrument and just start playing and jamming out. So start with improvising just some simple ideas, right? Don't try and go really, really complex and do a really like really fast kind of scale run. Just keep it one or two notes. Again, just go back and forth between the rhythm and the scale shape, right? Keep it really, really simple, right? Keep the rhythm quite simple as well. And once you're more comfortable with doing this, once you kind of get the hang of keeping it simple, then just ever so slightly increase the intensity, the complexity. Again, don't go from like 50% to 100%. Try going from like 50% to maybe 55 or 60%. So. Again, it kind of gradually increases over time. The more you practice this stuff, the more you get comfortable with it, the more you're going to be able to level this up. And then you kind of unlock the ability to just kind of mess around with it and create music inside of this shape. Now, the thing is, we want to start doing this with every single position inside of our major scale. So let's try doing this again for another chord in our key. So let's pick E minor. E minor is the 6th chord inside of the key of G major. So again, what scales can we play from the E minor chord? Most obviously, this E minor pentatonic. But we can also play this 6th position of the G major scale. And again, practice going backwards. So, now that we know like the 2 scale positions that we can play over the top of this chord, do the exact same process again. Keep that little rhythm going. And then practice going stepwise between each of the notes in sequence from this scale position. And I think you get the idea of that one there. Keep practicing that. And again, it's a really useful exercise. It's going to teach you where the tension points and where the resolution points are inside your scale. And it's also going to let your fingers understand what notes and frets you're allowed to hit in order to improvise some nice sounding music. Now again, once we've done that, level it up to doing the triad, right? So we have this root position triad right over here around this kind of E minor bar chord. So we're going to look at these scale tones that lie above and below. So we have the root over here that we can play like that. Then we have our minor third. We can play the scale tone above here, scale tone below there, then back into the third. Again, the same thing with the 5th. We have the 5th here, scale tone above, scale tone below. And then practice just kind of putting some rhythm down and going between those scale tones above, below, and then to the chord tone. And again, once you understand how to do that and you can keep that simple, then you can kind of like start upgrading it and letting loose and just seeing what happens when you mess around with the scale shapes, right? Around these points of the triad. Now, this is where things start to get really, really cool. Once you have multiple positions kind of mapped out and you've practiced kind of improvising and messing around with them, you can start making music by putting both of them together. So what if we started on the D major, we did this for a couple bars, and then we go to the E minor. It's going to sound really musical, as almost like as if we're improvising a song. We're creating it from the spot when we understand how to do this between different positions. So let's start on D major. And then move to E minor. And back to D major. And before you know it, the more you keep doing this, you're going to actually start mapping out the fretboard. There's going to get to a point where you understand how to do this for every single position inside of your key signature. So you're going to be able to do it for your 1 chord, your 2 chord, your 3 chord, 4 chord, 5th chord, 6th chord, and so on and so on. And you're going to be able to kind of like just bounce between every single position. So I could start over by the 2 chord. Then move over here to the 5th chord. Then maybe move to the 4 chord. And that kind of stuff there. And you've got the ability to do that with every single chord inside of your key. And you kind of have the fretboard mapped out at that point. And then you can just start using it, just jamming out, going back and forth between all these different chords, creating all these different interesting sounds. And you're going to be kind of happy with just being able to pick up the guitar and just playing this music with the stuff, the scales, the triads, the chords that you already know how to play. But again, you need to practice making music with it rather than just practice going through scales. The thing is, if you want to expand your understanding of the fretboard even further, I recommend you check out this other video that I've created over here. It's a nice guide on mapping out the fretboard. Again, all diagrams that have been shown in this video, you can find them inside my school community. There's a link in the description. It's completely free to join.